just a handful of verses this morning that I want you to get into, because there's really two parts of it. There's a shallow part, which everyone will understand and get to, but then there's a deep part. There's a shallow part which has to do with the way we live. It's really about us and the way we have doubts and faith. And then there's a deep part. Probably the deepest part you will ever hear in the Gospels will be what you hear toward the end of this message. And it's a handful of verses that deal with a subject that we all know very, very well. The doubting Thomas. Put your hand up if you know about the doubting Thomas. Okay, he's very well known. It begins in verse 12 or verse 24 of chapter 20, and it says, "Now Thomas the doubter, the doubting Thomas, called Didymus, which is a Greek word for twin. That is, he had a twin, identical or fraternal, we don't know, but he had a twin, probably identical. But he was called the twin, and he was one of the 12. But look what it says. He was not with the disciples when Jesus came." Now, when did Jesus come? Well, if you look back on verse 19, the evening of the day of the resurrection, that is, last Sunday evening, Jesus came, and he stood among the disciples. And a very powerful thing happened. I wish I could spend more time on it, but a very powerful, intimate thing happened. Jesus breathed on the disciples. It was, in essence, a reenactment of Genesis chapter 1, where God breathed into the nostrils of the clay man, and it says he became a living being. And so Jesus got that close, probably closer than anyone here would be comfortable with, that close, and he breathed on those disciples. And he said, "Receive the Holy Spirit." And they were filled with the Holy Spirit and became active disciples. Did you notice also that the doors are locked? Very important. I want to tell you why in just a moment. The doors are locked. And there were only 10 of them there. Judas, of course, is gone. And Thomas, we learn, the twin, Didymus, is gone also. He was not with them. But the fact that he wasn't there raises all kinds of doubts within himself, and everyone here can relate to that. We're all a mess and of a whole continuum and amalgamation of faith and doubt. Sometimes in our life we have more faith than doubt, sometimes more doubt than faith. Some people are so plagued with doubts they can never raise their hand. They can never say, "I believe." They can never get to that moment of peace when they say, "My Lord and my God," as Thomas did. And I see it all the time in my own ministry. I don't take it personally, but I personally feel what people are saying. For example, I go to a hospital and I'll make a couple of hospital calls, and it's not unusual in the same hospital visit to hear two different statements from two different people about essentially the same circumstance. One family will say, look at their loved one laid out on a bed suffering, and they'll say to me, "Father David, I don't know how people make it without faith." Because they feel buoyed by their faith. They feel that God is somehow upholding them. It doesn't matter that their loved one is in peril, on the edge of life. Doesn't matter. But I've also heard the same kind of circumstances, different kind of family, and people say to me, "Father David, I don't know how people can have faith having been through what my family's going through." The spectrum is here in this room. If we were all honest about it, you would see that you have felt one thing or another at one point or another along your life. And now we come to the poster child of doubt, Thomas. It says here that Thomas, the twin, was not with them when Jesus appeared. But look what they say in verse 25. "So the other disciples told him, 'We have seen the Lord.'" They have been breathed on. They have received the Holy Spirit. And look what Thomas says. "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger in the nails where the nails were and place my hand into his side, I will not believe it. What do you make of Thomas here? Do you know who Debbie Downer is on Saturday Night Live? She's the one that everyone's talking about something positive, and she always finds the negative. Everyone's talking about how the cup, the proverbial glass is half full, and she'll say, it's not half full, it's half empty, and it needs to be cleaned. And they say, my kids tell me this all the time, because I'm like her, wah, wah. You know, that's what Thomas is. We have seen the Lord, wah, wah. Unless I see, put my hands, etc., etc. This is the way Thomas is. He appears two other times in the Gospels. In John chapter 11, Jesus says, let's go to Bethany, and Bethany is a little dangerous for them. And Thomas says, okay, well, I guess we got to go because I'm going to die there too. Wah, wah. And then one time Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. John chapter 14, no one comes to the Father except through me. And Thomas says, how do we know the way? Wah, wah. This is what he does here. He's not just demanding proof. He's demanding an autopsy. He wants, and it's kind of gruesome, isn't it? Most people want a miracle or a show or a sign or a vision, but Thomas says, nope, gruesomely spoken, I want to put my hand in his side. I want to put my finger in the nail hole in his hand. And unless that happens, that's my litmus test. I'm not going to believe. And Jesus comes again into the room. This now on the 8th day, that Sunday evening, this Sunday evening. And I think he's had it. He says, peace be with you. But the way I read it, he says to Thomas, verse 27, put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand. Put it into my side. And then I think a very strong word. Stop doubting and believe. And Thomas comes to a point of faith. And he says, my Lord and my God. And Jesus says something to Thomas that I think serves up a rebuke to Thomas and a testimony of encouragement to every single one of us. He says, Thomas, you believe. You believe because you've seen. But there are generations to come, and this is where Jesus essentially takes a megaphone and speaks into the long trail of history that will follow from this moment. And he speaks to people like us. Blessed are those who believe without seeing. Blessed are those people around here, you and I, we're mentioned here. Blessed are you and I who believe without seeing, who actually believe the testimony of the apostles, who believe the word written for us, who believe everything that John wrote, that he said, these things I have written out that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, and that by believing him you may have life in his name. Blessed are you if you're there. I don't know how much to dwell on this, but I can't think of much more important things. There is a load of evidence in the scriptures. May not be the kind of evidence you want to, the kind of forensic evidence that you might in your own pride demand, but Jesus says, those people that will come throughout history, the generations to follow, the second generation, third generation, fourth generation, our generation, they're blessed if they just believe without seeing.
To make a monetary gift that supports the ministries of Christ Church Plano, visit christchurchplano.org.